Today is the day. The day that Smash DLC is set to come to a close and the Smash broadcast is set to go live in only a few hours. Or, it's already passed because YouTube wanted to take forever processing my upload. Not sure yet. Regardless, to tide us over until it begins, or help us cool down after stepping off the hype train for the last time, it's time for the next Underbrawl guide. Now then, who won that poll?
The winner is...
Ganondorf is a character who truly doesn't need an introduction. The main villain of the Legend of Zelda series is not only a fan favorite amongst Nintendo fans, but Smash Bros. Fans as well. While he is only a clone of Captain Falcon, people just can't help but enjoy the almost stipulation-style gameplay that Ganondorf has to offer. However, despite his popularity, Ganondorf's Smash Bros. Career has been rather rocky ever since its initial release in Melee 14 years ago. In Melee, he was a solid powerhouse who could KO characters easier than practically any character in the game, as well as having a bit of speed and mobility unlike a character like Bowser. Despite this, Ganondorf was painfully nerfed in the sequel, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and ended up becoming the worst character in the game, bar none, and has continued to stay at the bottom despite the changing tier lists. And now we're here in Smash 4, and while Ganondorf has become a lot more popular amongst players with this iteration, people are still questioning whether or not Ganondorf really has changed that much. It's definitely a guarantee that he's better than his Brawl iteration, but the question now is, by how much? With introductions out of the way, welcome to Underbrawl. Underbrawl is a series of competitive Smash Bros. Guides for characters that are claimed to be subpar by the general public. And, as a bonus to teaching you how to play the character in question, we also analyze the character to see if the characters truly deserve the flack they receive from the public. These guides are usually broken into 5 parts, including basic tools, special tools, specific training, extra tips, and a final assessment. Whether you're new to Smash, or you've been playing since 64, there's something for everyone. Let's start. Ganondorf's playstyle is all about the very element he embodies. What he embodies, what he seeks, what he desires, it's power. Ganondorf is all about hitting hard with single hit attacks that can rack up damage very fast in only a few simple hits. While Ganondorf is almost always going to be getting hit more than he hits his opponent, Ganondorf only really needs to hit his opponent roughly 6 to 7 times to put them in the KO territory, or just flat out KO them in general. However, while this sounds incredibly powerful and broken, Ganondorf ends up sacrificing not only his speed, but also his reach and mobility. This means that Ganondorf is an all-or-nothing close-range attacker. Ganondorf definitely lacks a lot, but thankfully for him, these downsides enable him with the greatest overall KO potential compared to practically any other character in the game. In a game where characters can survive for an astronomically long amount of time compared to the other Smash games, being able to kill with most of your attacks before the opponent hits 90% is a godsend. Of course, a character is only as good as the tools they have to offer, and surprisingly, Ganondorf has a good number of useful attacks to use against his opponent. Some of them may be decently fast and some of them may be a bit laggy, but they hit hard, and when it comes to Ganondorf, that's your main priority. Standard Jab. Ganondorf's Standard Jab is a single thrusting palm that can deal anywhere from 7 to 10% damage, depending on whether or not you land the sweet spot. This attack is one of Ganondorf's quicker attacks, and is mainly used either out of shield or right after a whiffed attack. This attack cannot KO, at least not in any normal KO range for Ganondorf, but it can knock the opponent away enough to grant you a chance to breathe. Side Tilt. Ganondorf's side tilt is a powerful extending leg kick that can knock opponents away and even KO if they're at the right percent. This attack comes out decently fast, allowing for a quick strike. However, it's not the most reliable of damage dealers as its cooldown is rather long. However, while it's not the best damage dealing attack, it's a tall attack that can easily KO most characters near the edge of the stage once they hit 100%. The best part about this attack is the fact that you can instantly change directions with it, making it easy to hit opponents trying to attack or land behind you. Down tilt. Ganondorf's down tilt is a quick thrusting kick at the opponent's shins, which will knock the opponent up into the air. This attack, unlike the side tilt, actually has a minimal cooldown, allowing for a possible quick retreat if the opponent blocks the attack. This attack can even KO opponents at high percents, and is usually used as a finisher after one of Ganondorf's useful attacks, Flame Choke. Dash attack. Ganondorf's dash attack is the same as Captain Falcon's, a charging shoulder attack that will send him barreling through opponents and even sometimes through their shields. This attack is stronger and covers more range than Falcon's, but as a result it has a slightly longer cooldown, making this attack a risky advancing option. While it is risky, the 14% damage it deals and the possible aerial follow-ups after it at certain percents certainly make it worth the risk. Forward Smash. Ganondorf's forward smash is also the same as Captain Falcon's, being a powerful elbow thrust that releases either a fiery or dark magic blast respectively. This attack has extra power on Ganondorf's end and even comes out as fast as Falcon's, but the extra power makes this attack have the longest cooldown of Ganondorf's smash attacks, so use sparingly if your opponent knows how to properly block attacks. However, if your opponent is block happy, feel free to use it at your leisure, as this attack does a ton of shield damage and can result in a shield break. If you manage to shield break your opponent, then you're Ganondorf! I'm sure you'll find a way to capitalize on your punish. Up Smash. Ganondorf's Up Smash is a quick leg strike that has a ton of KO power to it. This attack comes out slightly slower than Falcon's, but as a result it also ends sooner and has less cooldown. This attack is useful out of shield and can close out stocks at fairly early percents. If your opponent is large enough in frame, you might be able to use his attack on a Flame Choke as a more powerful follow-up option. Down Smash. Ganondorf's down smash is also the same as Falcon's, being a double-sided kick that hits in front of him first and then hits the opponent behind him, launching the opponent behind him. When used near the edge of the stage, this attack has been buffed to the point where it can kill characters like Sheik as early as 59%, making it an excellent early stock closer. This attack also has received better angles since the game's release, making it easier to land both hits. Side B, Flame Choke. One of the truly few unique attacks that Ganondorf actually has, Flame Choke is a dashing command grab that will work both on the ground and in the air, both resulting in slamming the opponent into the ground with dark energy. This attack sends Ganondorf forward rather quickly, making it easy to close a gap on an opponent and catch them off guard. This attack is commonly used in conjunction with down tilt to cause extra damage and inflict a solid 25% in only 2 hits. However, it can also be used with attacks like forward tilt, forward smash, and again, as previously mentioned, up smash if the opponent has a wide enough frame. Also, if you want to be a bit more overzealous, you can always play off stage with this attack and close out the match by taking the opponent to the grave with you by using it in midair. While this attack is strong in its own right, do keep in mind that opponents can tech and roll out of the attack if they time it right, as well as the fact that if you're planning on using Ganondorf in any kind of online battle, that poor connectivity or low bandwidth may result in the down tilt after Flame Choke flat out not registering and leaving you wide open for a punish. It's a real shame that one of Ganondorf's most useful attack strings is so faulty when online, but there's nothing I nor anyone can do about that. Down B, Wizard's Foot. This attack is essentially Ganondorf's version of the Falcon Kick. While it isn't as fast or doesn't travel as far as Captain Falcon's attack, Ganondorf's attack is far more powerful and will knock the opponent away farther than that of Captain Falcon's. I think you're starting to see a trend here. This attack, like Flame Choke, is a great way to close gaps on opponents while dealing some damage, and unlike the Falcon Kick, the Wizard's Foot is an incredibly deadly attack if used near the top of the screen. Using this attack while opponents are pursuing you in the air will more than likely result in an easy KO as the attack knocks the opponent upwards for the most part. However, you can also smash the opponents down into the ground if hit from hit from the right angle, and it can even meteor smash the opponent if you angle it right. This is only scraping the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Ganondorf's useful attacks, because as you might have noticed, I didn't mention any of Ganondorf's aerials. Well, since I truly believe that Ganondorf's aerials are the best part of his moveset, I think that there should be a part dedicated solely to them and how to use them. And with that, let's move on to just that. It's clear that since he's a clone of Captain Falcon, Ganondorf uses a lot of Falcon's character elements and while adding in his own powerhouse flair in the process. Thankfully, for both him and players, the developers decided to give Ganondorf some of Falcon's stronger elements, namely his aerial game. While Falcon's aerial game is made more for barrages and combos, Ganondorf's incredibly powerful one-hit aerials are some of the best ways a Ganondorf player can deal damage. Pressure and approach, or just flat out kill his opponent. Regardless, Ganondorf has a little something for everyone when it comes to his aerial skills. Neutral Air. Ganondorf's Neutral Air is a double kick that will hit for around 22% with both attacks, with both kicks coming out fairly fast. Not only are these kicks faster, but also have less cooldown than Falcon's Neutral Air as well. If that weren't enough, this attack has received buffs in terms of attack connection as of the last patch, making it very easy to land both hits. Using this attack out of short hop is a great way to pressure your opponent's approach, especially on opponents that like to jump. Forward Air. Ganondorf's Forward Air is not Falcon's Knee of Justice, but is instead an arcing punch that is incredibly powerful and does a ton of damage. This attack has a bit of a wind-up, but thankfully its landing leg is not that bad, and has only continued to be improved since the game's launch. This attack can be used to damage shields, take out edgehogs, and possibly even KO, just to make sure that you always fast fall after the wind-up to ensure the least amount of recovery time. Up Air. Ganondorf's and Falcon's up aerials are almost completely identical, that being an overhead flip kick. But while Falcon's up aerial is made to juggle and combo his opponent, Ganondorf's is made to be a solid edge guarding tool, amongst other things. Ganondorf's attack will knock the opponent away from him as opposed to straight up like Falcon's, making it a strong attack to use off stage against an opponent either trying to recover or trying to edgeguard against you. You don't even need to be facing the opponent to use this move, as his attack can hit and knock away opponents behind him as well. It can even be a possible follow-up attack after his dash attack if you time the jump right. Back Air. Ganondorf's back air is one of the game's best back airs, hands down. This attack is basically Falcon's back air, but aside from coming out just as fast and having a 1.5 times the amount of knockback compared to Falcon's, this attack has almost no cooldown, allowing for Ganondorf to land and instantly shield, attack, or roll out of short hop. This attack is also Ganondorf's greatest edge guarding tool, as he is easily capable of jumping off the stage and jumping right back on since this attack is so quick, and with the amount of power this attack has, this attack will easily be able to KO characters as early as 50 to 55% from the edge of the screen. Down Air. Ganondorf's Meteor Smash, and quite frankly, the most famous Meteor Smash in all of Smash itself. Ganondorf's Double Boot Meteor Smash deals a ton of damage and is incredibly easy to use, even easier than that of Captain Falcon's Down Air, since Ganondorf's attack is slower, making it easier for a Ganondorf player to line up and time a dunk. This dunk comes out decently fast and deals a massive 19% damage, making an attack to use even if the opponent isn't off stage. The Meteor Smash hitbox on this attack is quite large, making it one of the easiest dunks to land, but the hitbox on this attack is bigger than you think, as you can even hit opponents slightly next to or at the same level with this attack and you'll send them flying upwards or down into the floor. Long story short, if you see an opportunity, capitalize on it, because there's not many things in this game that are as satisfying as dunking someone with the heels of evil. Ganondorf's aerial game has been designed quite well for a character that can't jump very high, which is quite surprising. What's even more surprising, however, is that Ganondorf has garnished a reputation among Smash players for being a master of a specific trait, and has been notorious for it ever since its introduction in Melee. I am of course talking about the fact that Ganondorf is known to the Smash Bros. Community as the King of Disrespect. What does that mean and how can you do it too? Find out in the next part.
Ready? Go!
The term disrespect has a lot of meanings, especially when it comes to a game like Smash Bros. While many people have their own description of what it means to disrespect someone in Smash Bros., I believe it basically equivalates to 3 different things. Number 1. You KO an opponent in a reserved but brutal manner. Number 2. You KO an opponent when they already had no chance of recovering / coming back to the stage, as opposed to letting them fall to their death. And number 3. You KO an opponent with attack that you normally wouldn't. There's probably a ton more reasons behind this analogy, but this is what I believe it truly boils down to. Now, you might be asking, how does a character like Ganondorf fit into the disrespectful category? Well, the answer is quite simple. Ganondorf, as a character, is incredibly brutal thanks to the extra attack power his attacks have compared to the rest of the cast. Being the character with the highest KO potential, he doesn't need to hit his opponent much to destroy them, which usually benefits players who tend to play a reserved and defensive game. And, to top it off, Ganondorf not only has several moves in his arsenal that fit the whole "you really shouldn't be getting hit with this" bill, namely his up tilt and standard B, but thanks to the incredible amount of attack power he has, Ganondorf has basically been deemed the most powerful punishing character in the entire game. Surely Ganondorf can also get punished as easily as he can punish others, but the amount of damage output that he has, if your opponent makes one mistake against you, you have the ability to either deal over 40% damage, 60% damage, or just take them from 0 to KO in a matter of seconds. Standard B and up tilt are by far Ganondorf's most powerful attacks, both dealing around 30% damage and having the ability to KO incredibly early. But the startup time on these attacks are phenomenally long, making them almost impossible to land. Heck, it is specifically because of his up tilt that Ganondorf has the highest amount of frame data in Smash 4 compared to every other character. Regardless of that though, whenever you actually do land a successful hit with these attacks, it's almost always something to celebrate, especially if it KOs. But it's one thing to just tell you about Ganondorf's disrespectful charm, and it's another to teach you how to use it. These tips are designed to teach you the ins and outs of everything a Ganondorf player should know and learn before having a real match. These tips will teach you what you need to know about disrespect, situational use, defensive and offensive play, and more. Let's get started. Number 1. Avoid overexertion. Ganondorf may be a character that's brutal by nature, but that brutality doesn't mean that you can afford to be reckless. Throwing around his heavy attacks on impulse may land a few successful hits, but for the most part, it's only going to give your opponent the advantage and get you killed. Ganondorf succeeds best when he's played in a cautious and defensive style, as he is one of the best punishers in the game, as previously mentioned, purely thanks to how much damage his attacks do. Most, if not all, of Ganondorf's potential comes from capitalizing on mistakes made by your opponent. Hence why KOs with Warlock Punch and up tilt are actually possible. So take heed in watching your opponent closely. If they give an inch, take a mile, as Ganondorf only really needs a single opening to deal 30% plus damage or take them from 0 to KO. Number 2. Learn cooldown and startup times. Being able to react and follow up to attacks is crucial to success in Smash Bros., and this tends to be a bit harder for the heavyweight characters to achieve consistently. Since Ganondorf's attacks aren't that fast, you need to learn how long it takes for attacks to come out, and how quickly you can either roll, shield, or follow up with another attack afterwards. It's all about learning which attacks fit which situation, sort of like the rotations in an MMO. but instead of using the same attacks in tandem, it's more using specific attacks when your opponent is left open. If your opponent is close and they shield a down tilt or side tilt, quickly follow up with a standard jab to create a gap and catch them off guard. If your opponent is trying to roll behind you, use side tilt in the opposite direction you're facing or quickly dash and catch them as their roll ends with flame choke, and so on and so forth. Just keep in mind that while his faster attacks are more efficient, they're not the only option. So if you can manage an up tilt or Warlock Punch, I say feel free to give it a try. Warlock Punch received super armor in Smash 4, making it more reliable to deal heavy damage than that of up tilt, although up tilt is still a possible ledge punish. Number 3. Keep move diversity fresh and consistent. The biggest issue that the heavyweight characters in Smash tend to have, aside from being a lot slower than the rest of the cast, is the fact that they're the easiest characters to read and predict by far. Since most heavyweights usually use a small set of attacks to deal heavy damage, a lot of players tend to know what they're up against when they're playing against characters like Ganondorf. If you keep using the same attacks in the same order or you use an attack too often, your opponent will be able to read it and punish it, and be able to do so far easier than with a really fast character or a character with range. Ganondorf, compared to a lot of other heavyweights, has some of the most widespread options in terms of attacking his opponents, as all of his aerials are strong and even his grounded tilts can deal heavy damage and knockback, especially compared to the limited use of other heavyweights like Charizard. With the amount of options Ganondorf provides, it should be easy to keep up your moveset diversity and catch your opponent off guard, or it's even possible to use stale attack strategies to throw your opponent off, which can lead to hilarious punishes, possibly even a KO through Warlock Punch or again, up tilt. Number 4. Don't be afraid to play off stage. It's true that Ganondorf doesn't have that strong of a recovery, as well as not being able to jump very high, but that shouldn't discourage you from trying to attack and fight off screen if you're the one in control of the ledge. Ganondorf is both one of the worst and best characters in terms of offstage combat, and it completely depends on whether or not you're the one recovering or stopping someone from recovering. When you're the one in control of the edge, Ganondorf will usually end up KOing his opponents around 65 to 70% at the latest with his back air or forward air, and you can even end up using his neutral air to stop the return of characters with poor or more horizontal recoveries. And, of course, you can always end up landing the incredibly satisfying down air dunk finish that usually leaves a salty taste in your opponent's mouth. However, while you can perform well off stage when you have the stage advantage, it's not an excuse to get overzealous and throw out attacks recklessly. Sometimes it's best to hold back and not hit your opponent off stage, especially when they have a counter. In situations like this, it's best to lull out a counter, have it whiff, and then follow up with an attack. When it comes to a game like Smash, patience is almost always rewarded, especially when it's properly timed patience. With tips like these, you'll be able to avoid a lot of common mistakes made by more novice Ganondorf players, especially since many novice players see Ganondorf as a character who can easily win thanks to how powerful he is and how forgiving he is, as he is a character that you only need to hit your opponent a couple of times to flat out kill them. While Ganondorf's definitely not a complex character by any means, he's certainly harder to play than a good number of characters thanks to the stipulations his playstyle places on you. However, the stipulations placed on you only tend to make your victory all the more sweeter, and it's because of that that a lot of people love playing Ganondorf. With all of that said and done, let's talk about some extra tips you can use to help improve the way you play as Ganondorf. Whereas the last part covered more practical tips on playing the King of Evil, this segment involves more tips for the player than for the character the player is playing as. Whereas the previous guys discussed special ways to play and use the character's abilities, Ganondorf is incredibly straightforward and sadly doesn't have anything like this. While that may be the case, there's still some tips I can pass on to aspiring Ganondorf players that are just as important, if not more. These 3 tips are simple to learn and easy to understand, even for the most novice Smash player. Tip number 1. Don't prejudge your opponent, aka don't play too aggressive with slow attacks. When you play as Ganondorf and you end up landing a successful KO with Warlock Punch or Up Tilt, it's going to feel incredibly satisfying. Satisfying to the point where, obviously, you're going to want to try and do it again. If you end up throwing out these incredibly slow and punishable attacks like these on a whim, you're going to not only miss a huge majority of the time, but also get punished just as badly. Attacks like these are meant to be used when you truly believe you can outwit your opponent, and should be used accordingly. They're almost impossible to land on characters with high mobility, and even more impossible to land on characters with a counter, so sometimes it's just best to pass on using this attack in a match entirely. Tip number 2. Don't play Ganondorf like you would Captain Falcon. While it is indeed true that Ganondorf and Captain Falcon use the same kind of character structure and a lot of the same kind of moves, their differences in mobility, speed, and possible aggressive payoffs are very, and I mean very, different. If you're a Captain Falcon player who's trying to learn to play Ganondorf, there's several habits as a Falcon player you really need to shake off. The first habit to drop on the switch to Ganondorf is dash grabbing, one of a Falcon player's most common approach strategies. Not only is Ganondorf way slower than Falcon, oh shit, but his dash grab is incredibly slow, making this strategy literally impossible for a Ganondorf player. The second habit to shake off on your Falcon playing days is your up air barrage, aka what almost every Falcon player likes to do either after a down throw or just against airborne opponents in order to try and juggle them. Ganondorf's aerial, very similar in appearance, is made again to knock the opponent away as opposed to knocking them upwards. This attack will either knock them away from you when you're hitting them from the front, or backwards if you're hitting them from behind you. Lastly, the habit you need to break more than any other as a Falcon player is to get out of the mindset of the overall momentum and speed that comes along with Falcon's playstyle. It's true that Captain Falcon can set up a lot of attacks really fast, which is why Falcon is such a dangerous character in Smash 4, possibly even one of the most dangerous, especially with that dash grab. However, Ganondorf's bounce pace is very moderate and reserved, which usually boils down to a lot of your moves and attacks being made off of your opponent's mistakes as opposed to And lastly, the most important tip I can give as a Ganondorf main: don't get discouraged. This is again the most important tip I can give as a Ganondorf main, especially since Ganondorf is a character that can be a bit discouraging to play as. Contrast to beginner bait Captain Falcon, Ganondorf isn't a pick up and play character that can instantly result in victory if your opponent isn't prepared, as he requires a lot of analyzing your opponent's movements and playstyle and then manipulating them into incredibly powerful punches that only Ganondorf himself can muster. On top of that, Ganondorf is all about power, so you're incredibly limited in terms of speed, mobility, and range. So he's not a character that is openly recommended for beginners either. With all of this said, it's very easy for some players to just give up on trying to master the character and just leave him behind. While it's true that Ganondorf is very limited in a lot of his tools, the thing that, in my opinion, makes Ganondorf so worthwhile to play, even more than Captain Falcon, is one simple word: satisfaction. Ganondorf, in my opinion, is one of the most satisfying characters to play in all of Smash. And this is because of every hit has a ton of power and impact. No character in Smash is going to leave you feeling as satisfied when landing one of Ganondorf's most powerful attacks, especially when they KO. His incredible Meteor Smash, his Warlock Punch, his up tilt, hell, even a forward or down tilt after a Flame Choke. Of course you're going to take a ton of damage in the process and easily get hit more than your opponent, but when you're playing as a character that, when played right, can flat out KO his opponents in 6 to 7 hits, I don't see much of a problem with that. The ability to punish better than any other character in the game is what draws in people to play Ganondorf, myself included. However, you'll only ever achieve that if you keep at it and don't give up on the character. Of course you're not going to win every battle, nobody does, but don't let a small losing streak stop you. Keep practicing, keep disrespecting, and keep positive. It's the best advice I can give, and I hope that it helps you in your future endeavors. These tips are for both long-time and to-be Ganondorf players, and I hope that they assist you in making you become a much better player in the future. Now then, with all of that said and done, and basically all the tips, tricks, and more given, let's move on and give Ganondorf his final assessment.
Ready?
Ganondorf is a character that basically defines the powerhouse archetype unlike any other character in Smash. He has enough power to flat out KO his opponents in an average of 5 to 7 hits, depending on weight, and easily has the highest KO potential of any character in the entire series. Not only that, but some of Captain Falcon's charm must have worn off on him, as Ganondorf can transition into follow-ups and combos much easier than a good number of other heavyweights in the game. Lastly, Ganondorf is easily the best punishment character in the entire game due to his incredibly high damage output, which is where his title of King of Respect comes from. As for his cons, it's very obvious. As he's all about power, Ganondorf has sacrificed almost all of his speed, mobility, jumping ability, and reach for just that. With this, he's almost always forced to approach his opponents and can definitely struggle a bit with characters who have a projectile, or worse, a counter. That being said, his heavy stature does give him a bit of leeway in ignoring this, as well as the fact that he doesn't need to hit his opponent that much in order to flat out KO them. But cons are still cons, and can't be ignored. Overall, Ganondorf is a character with a lot of problems. But while his pros don't seem to outweigh his cons, his pros are incredibly important and useful pros that give him his sustain and usefulness as a character. If I were to place Ganondorf anywhere on the tier list, it'd be somewhere around Little Mac. In the high-low tiers, they are just outside the lower mid-tier standing. He's got too many problems to be in the higher tiers, but he's not terrible enough to the point where he's on the same ground as, say, Palutena or Zelda. This may seem underwhelming, but Ganondorf has only continued to get buffed since the game's launch, and this is still one hell of a step up from his Brawl iteration. In terms of buffs, the least I can recommend is to keep improving his landing leg on his aerials, since they're so useful, and to reduce the leg on his side tilt by just a bit. With Smash 4, we've basically been forced to come to terms with the fact that Ganondorf will forever be a clone of Captain Falcon as long as the series continues. While this is a bit sad to hear, there's nothing to prove that Ganondorf may not get a bit more variation from Falcon in the future. Perhaps in the form of the Warlock Blade becoming his new standard special, or his down B being changed into a charging sword swing. Little things like this that are basically an aesthetic change but make Ganondorf more faithful to his franchise. However, what we have now is perfectly fine, and I have no problem maining him for years to come. Thanks for watching and happy holidays! So, what'd you think about that Smash Direct? Insane stuff, huh? This is all being said ahead of time, of course, and I'm presumably taking shots in the dark and saying that it will be good because, well, I have hope in Sakurai that it will be good. Regardless, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Now then, if you're interested in more content, you can click the link below to go to the last guide I did, that one being on Samus Aran. However, If you're interested in something new, click the link below to go to Bryhard's latest video based on hype and video games. It's a good watch, and may/may not possibly correlate to today's Smash Direct. Well then, with all that said and done, I'll be seeing you all around for another episode, another time. Bye.